In this video, we're going to continue adding detail to the precast structure that has the EIFS exterior assembly. Right now, I'm in sheet A303. I'm going to go to the wall section for the precast structure. We'll begin with adding more detail to the grade beam and the slab. We'll be using some of the information provided in this detail, which shows a grade beam here and a concrete slab. Inside those components, you'll see that there's some reinforcing. So we'll be adding reinforcing that looks like this. And we'll also be adding a void form, which is located directly below the grade beam. This is an example of a void form. What we have here is this material that's located directly below the cage for the grade beam. In this case, it's a little bit wider, but that doesn't really matter. Basically, what the void form is doing is providing temporary support for the grade beam until the concrete has time to cure. Basically, our grade beam is going to stretch, and you can see it in this image here. There's a pier right here and a pier right here. Once the concrete is formed, the load path will go from the grade beam to those two piers, and it will not bear any weight on the materials below here. So it's just a temporary component that's placed during the curing process of the grade beam. We'll start by making a region for the void form. So I'm going to make a line here temporarily, and I'm going to take this line and I'm going to move it down 4 inches. Okay. And then I'll go to I'm already on the Annotate tab, and I'll create a region. For the region type, I'm going to look for one called vertical lines, and I'll use the rectangle tool. I'm going to have thin lines for this rectangle, and I'll create a rectangle like that and click on the check mark. And there I have something that illustrates that void form. All right, next thing I'm going to do is start adding the reinforcing for the slab. I'll start with a detail line going directly towards the top. And I've selected it. I'm going to change this to thin line so it has the same weight as some of the other items in the view. And I'll erase the temporary line that I created. Next, I'm going to go to the components, and I'm going to look for a reinforcing bar. I'll use number 6, which is 3/4 of an inch. And I'll temporarily place one at the corner, and then I will move it in 3 inches over, 3 inches up. Let's do a line. Let's make this line all the way up and draw a line from the midpoint here. And I'll use that as my mirror line for the top 2 reinforcing components. There it goes. Rectangle. For the radius, I'm going to input 0.5 inches. And then I'm going to snap to those centers. And then I will use the offset tool. The offset distance will be 0.5 inches. Pick that. And I'll have to kind of go around, and you may have to do a little bit of erasing. So here we go, offset. And then you can erase the ones on the interior side. And to get the detail to have that sort of overlap condition, you can modify the detail a little bit. I'm going to copy this one. I'll move that up 0.5 inches. So I'm going to copy this one, same 5 inches here, and extend this out and extend this out. And I will add under annotate detail lines. I'll just extend this line a couple of inches. Let's try it one more time. Got to keep it horizontal, 2 inches. And the same thing with this one down here. Okay. And there's the rebar for our grade beam. And I'll create a line here under the same line type. And I'm going to move that one up 2 inches. It will give me some welded wire reinforcing. So I've got to repair this. And I will bring this in a couple inches or so. So these would be done in different pours. Now I'm in one of the other wall section details, and I'm just going to grab a bunch of content from this detail and bring it over. Crushed gravel, vapor retarder, and I'm going to hit Control C and then go back to my precast wall section detail and Control V, bring it in there. Now I may need to move it around a little bit, but that should give me a little bit of a head start on some of the other content. Yeah, I think I'll need to bring the vapor retarder back in, but I can and I'll move that from this point to this one down here. And then I'll go back and get the vapor retarder. Control C, go back to the precast wall section. Okay. Well, I may need to move things around a little bit, but the next thing we'll be looking at is adding is the detail at the bottom of the wall where the EIFS extends past the slab. So we'll be adding metal channels, and we'll be adding a symbol to represent the mesh of the EIFS. At a later point, we'll be adding some of the notes that you see here. But one thing that you'll notice is that that mesh comes down and turns under and then returns back up underneath. There's also an air and water barrier at the back of the EIFS. And additionally, we have included some thickness for a drainage mat to go behind the EIFS insulation layer. This detail shows an air water barrier at the back here, and it just makes a little bend here. There's also a note that talks about flashing. So there is what's referred to as flashing that crosses the joint between the wall here and the slab. This detail shows something slightly different. What we have back here is a layer of water resistive and air barrier coating. And at the bottom here, there is something called a sheathing joint tape, and it's embedded within the barrier. So that air and moisture barrier, which just comes basically down. We'll start off with making the air and water barrier, which is located toward the back of the EIFS. So I'm going to go to annotate detail line, I'm going to set my line type to 1/16-3, and I'll start from this point at the bottom, and I will measure up 24 feet, 9.5 inches. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is move that over so it's not on top of the other line by 1/4 of an inch. And if we go up to the top here, you should see it reaches the top of the wall. All right, the next part will be to add a line that represents the mesh for the EIFS. Before I do that, though, I'm going to create a new line type. So I'm going to go to Manage, Additional Settings, Line Styles. I'm going to expand the categories under lines. And I'll notice here, I notice here that when I go down, let's expand this out a little bit. I have a few hidden line types. I'm going to create a new one that uses the same 1/16, but it's going to be a little bit lighter, 1/16-2. So I'll create a new one. I'll call it hidden 1/16-2. And for the line type, I'm going to make it hidden 1/16. And I'll change the weight to 2 and apply and OK. All right, now I'll do the same process of creating the lines for the EIFS. This will be the mesh. I'm going to go to Annotate, Detail Line, change it to the new line type, the line style. Click here, and I will go up 24 feet, 9.5 inches. And I'll take that line and I will move it over 0.25. It's not on top of the other line. And I will repeat the process for the part of the mesh that wraps below and turns up. So I'll go back over here and here. Click on that, move it up 0.25 inches. Okay, and it looks like it's joined those two lines, and I'll come up with one more line, bring it up, let's say 4 inches. Okay, and I will move that one over to 5 inches. Okay. Right, there we go. That is all you need to do at this point for the mesh. There'll be a little bit more work later as we move up the wall. Okay, I'm going to add some channels at the bottom of the wall here. So we need to find the right type. I'm going to scroll up here to where we get to channel studs, and this wall is 6 inches thick, at least the metal framing portion of it. So I'm going to move it up a little bit just so there's a gap and we can identify it in our notes later. So I'll put one there, and I'm going to add one at the top of the wall. Back to component. This one will need to be rotated around. Oops. Rotate 180 degrees, and I will then move it into position and drop it down that same 1/4 of an inch. So it's a little easier to identify. Right, next, what we're going to be doing is going up to the level 2 floor, and we'll add a joint in the EIFS that would be necessary for movement. Contraction and expansion of materials will inevitably happen, so we'll add one of those. And we'll follow, to some degree, the details shown here. If you'll notice, there is a backer rod and sealant happening right here. So here's our floor slab. Here we have some metal framing, and there's something called a slip joint or a sliding stud connection. So in other words, we have one metal framing member that is attached to the slab and another one underneath it. So that is permitting there to be some movement in the wall. And if you'll notice, this top layer of our EIFS wall assembly is connected to the upper part, and the lower part is just below that. Okay, so again, it's anticipating some movement in the joint. So the first thing that I'll do is to add another channel. Okay, I'll place it over here on the side, and then I will rotate it. (180 degrees). And I'm going to move it from here to here. And like I did before, I'm going to move it a little bit down, even though it would be attached directly to the slab. And for the channel that sits inside it, because I wanted to show a little bit in this detail, I'm going to construct it out of lines. So I have a channel that's sitting over here so that I can use it for the purpose of measuring. Let's try it again. Measure tool. 1 3/8. Okay, so I'll make it slightly narrower than that, but I'm going to make the leg here the same dimension. So I'm going to go to annotate, detail line, and for this one, we'll see how a medium line looks. I'm going to draw, it's going to be too heavy. Detail line, thin line. Move that. .25 inches. And I'll create another line. From here down 1.375 inches. And I will move that one in the same 0.25 inches. And I'll repeat that for the other side. Okay, and then I have something that I can point to in a note. So where we should make this joint, I'm going to make it just below the upper channel. So I'll create a temporary line here, bring it across. So it's snapping to the bottom of that channel. And I'm going to make my joint 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to trim this line. Okay, I just used this split elements tool. Now I'm going to take one end down to my first guideline, and I can unjoin them. It's okay. And the second one down here. I'm going to probably need to clean this up a little bit, and plus I may want to give a little bit of an offset. But basically what I'll do is create a circular graphic indicating the backer rod, and I'll also show an arc for the sealant. Before I do that, I'm going to create a masking region. I'll use the rectangle tool. I'll change my lines to invisible lines, and I'll come out just a little bit. I can always bring that in if I need to. And I'll come back to that point and click on the check mark. Okay, so now there's a break in the material. For my circle, I'll use thin lines, and let's see here. I will make a radius of 0.375 inches. And I will move it down 0.375 inches. And I'll also move it towards the right. So the dimension for the sealant really wants to be twice the value in this direction as it is in this depth. So I'm going to move that backer rod back 0.75 inches. And then I'll construct an arc to serve as the face of the sealant joint. Okay, for the detail line for the arc, I'm going to use this one that's start end radius. And I'll draw those two lines, and then I'll just give it a slightly concave shape. Right now I can get rid of those two lines. So I will need to turn the mesh in, the same detail that I used here at the bottom. So let's see if I can copy these. Oops, too high. Go. I'm going to go to snap to this point here. And then I can bring this up and rejoin them. Let's see if we can fill it. Okay, then same detail on the bottom side. And then we can pull this out so it's closed. Okay, so I'm going to mirror these two main axis. So I may need to create a temporary line. Let's try again. Hold down Control, mirror, and then go to modify, and we'll bring those back together. We do. Oops. Yeah, gotta let them unjoin. And then I'll click on this and bring this out further. There we go. Okay, so that is a movement joint. Okay, and we'll add a reinforcing component in here, not a component, but a line representing the reinforcing. So I'm going to change my line type to 330 seconds 3, and I'll draw a line across here. Now I'll move that line up 1 inch. Okay, and we'll take care of our joint at the floor level. And the last part of this will be to add a gravel stop at the top of the wall and a termination for the EIFS. So the first thing I want to do is join the reinforcing or the insulation layer at the roof with the wall component. Looks like it updated the precast. Okay, for our detail, we will be showing something called a gravel stop, which is this metal component that sits at the top of the wall, and basically is keeping water from getting into the wall assembly. So here's our EIFS layer. Now our detail is reversed. So we have the exterior on the left side, but the same thing applies. There's another piece that sits underneath the gravel stop that would be attached to some kind of blocking. Now our insulation is much higher than this, so our detail is going to look a little bit different, but basically this is the idea. And also I should mention that the membrane will come up and underneath the gravel stop. Now, based on the pitch of my roof and wanting to maintain 1/4 inch per foot, when I come over to the edge here and I measure the thickness of the insulation, I get 7.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to need to kind of build up a sort of curb at the edge here to kind of have something to attach the gravel stop to. So when I go to components, under annotate components, what I don't have in here are some wood blocking members, which would be typical in this condition. So I'm going to need to bring them into my Revit model. So I'm going to go to load Autodesk family, and I'm going to type in wood framing. Nominal cut and lumber section. Let's load them. I want a 2x8. So let's say okay. And I'll go back to annotate components, and I will bring in 2x8. There we go. That looks better. And maybe I'll put 3 of them in here. And I'll move that one. They're all side by side. And let's see here. I'm going to need to place another one up towards the top here, but this one's going to have an odd shape. It's going to be kind of beveled at the edge here, so that when I put the membrane, I don't have a sharp turn, and I can let it kind of roll up and over this member. So let's take some dimensions here. So these should be 4.5, and then I'm going to come out another 4.5 inches. So let's see. We may want to just construct this out of line work. Now I'm going to change my line weight. Let's try medium this time. 1.5 inches. And then I'll bring it back. I'll create another line along the bottom. And this one, I will look for 135, and then I'll use the fillet tool. Bring that back. Now, perhaps it would be better to generate this as a region. So what I'm going to do now is go and create a region. I may need to bring these to the front, but let's get that mask locked in there. This filled region will be solid white. And right now it's set to invisible lines, but if I did change this to the medium lines, I could just trace this, and then everything beyond it will be hidden. And I can do another set of lines to indicate that this is a kind of blocky material. Okay, now for my air and moisture barrier, I'm going to drop that down a little bit, and I'm going to create that same condition where the mesh comes around the back. I'll try to copy that from what I've done down here. Control. Go back up to the top of my wall. And from those corners together like so. All right, now maybe this wanted to go a little higher, like a 2.5 inch or 2 inch additional, but I think this will work out well for our detail. Okay, so some things are showing beyond, but I think when we add the membrane, we'll be able to resolve that issue. So next what we'll add is this piece of metal that will be behind the gravel stop. Okay, and then we'll add the gravel stop around it. Perhaps before that, though, we can put in that membrane layer. Okay, now I have some lines that I drawn before I added that region, and maybe I can offset them. Let's see here, offset, let's try again, 1/4. I'm going to offset it again. I think we need a little bit more, the gap. And then I'll erase underneath. This one here, I'm going to offset. This one. And, probably could have left that as it was. It might be a little too shallow, but let's go ahead and add another line representing the membrane. See if I can snap override and go to nearest. And then I will offset that. I'm going to change that to a medium line. And delete the first line that I've made. Bring these two together. That membrane will come and wrap underneath the gravel stop. And you want that piece to drop down maybe a few inches. So I'll go ahead and begin constructing that. We want it to cover the joint between the blocking and the top of the EIFS. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from the top of the blocking. I'll make this line 3 inches. If I get an extra line in there to reconstruct. Detail line 3 inches. Move it over 0.25 inches, give it a little space. And this one is a thin line. We can leave it like that. Detail line, and I'll bring this 135 degrees, maybe 0.5 inches. All right, so that gravel stop is going to basically snap into that component, and it will be attached to this blocking at the top. So let's go ahead and offset some lines. .25 should be okay. Move that. Okay, and then I'll draw another line. We want to increase the thickness of these. Okay, I've made this line 5 inches, and I'll also increase the weight. And one last line, 45 degrees. And bring those two together. All right, that's all the detail work that we'll be adding to this wall section for now. The remaining parts are to add annotations. And on the sheet that has the rest of the precast details, we'll add a little bit more to that as well.